You're listening to the Well Woman podcast. I'm your host, Jema Lee, women's menstrual cycle educator, natural fertility coach, and daytime mermaid. This is a place where we discuss all things periods, poo, ovulation, fertility, and sex. Join me weekly as we rediscover our menstrual cycles, unlock its superpowers, and guide you back into your cyclical nature. Grace, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jema, for having me.
You are very welcome. You are just such a beautiful person and genius in a particular topic that we're going to be talking about today, Korean herbalism, and I can't wait to dive in. So before we do that though, tell us, as we just mentioned before we hit record, what is your cycle day today and how are you checking in? How are you feeling in this moment?
Yeah, so my cycle always happens on the 24th or most of the time. So it's in a week. And lately I've been feeling a little emotional, a bit hormonal. So yeah, it's coming soon. I can feel it.
Oh, I love women can always sense when there's a big shift or a change going on. And this is that change of like, okay, we've been producing hormones this whole time. And now we're like, and we're winding down.
Yeah, totally. Like a friend, she handed me a clementine this afternoon, and it just triggered all these memories of moments that I gave like an ex-boyfriend clementines. So anyway, I was like, okay, maybe it's the hormones also is affecting all of this.
Oh, well, you're here and thank you for dedicating the time pre-menstrual to be here to share all about your beautiful wisdom on Korean herbalism. So let's jump into the topic. Explain to us, like, how did you get into Korean herbalism? For those who can't see you, you are Korean, right? So that's
Yes.
definitely a clue into it. But how did you gain this passion for Korean herbalism, and why is it so important that we know about Korean herbalism? How did you get into this space?
Yeah, so I'm Korean American. I was born and raised in Dallas, Texas, and I had the privilege to be taught to embrace both cultures. And my journey into herbalism started with my ancestral roots being Korean. My paternal grandmother was a farmer in Paju, South Korea. She was very productive. She raised 6 kids on her own. She was a
Wow.
midwife also to the local village, and she managed a commercial farm. And so very active in her local community, and very, she was like a true matriarch. And my maternal grandmother, on the other hand, she was married to a general post-Korean War. And she was just very, she was a housewife and very maternal too, but a different type of maternal kind of wisdom. And shortly after, like, I think my mom was around 18, 19 years old, her father passed away. So my grandmother suddenly became a widow. And then she got into a major car accident, which she became partially paralyzed on the left side of her body. And it was through the power of acupuncture and herbal medicine that she was able to regain her strength and movement. And from then on, she committed her life to Eastern medicine and studied to become an acupuncturist and a healer.
Wow.
So yeah, so growing up, when my parents immigrated to the States, I had the privilege to live with both my grandmothers, especially my paternal grandmother, who was a farmer, and she really missed her farm in South Korea. So she found actually a empty landfill, like in the middle of Texas, and started picking up all the trash and pulling out all the weeds, and created this beautiful community garden for all the Korean grandmothers to harvest, to like farm and harvest and grow their own herbs and vegetables. And
Wow. So like, can I be in your family? This sounds spectacular. I have chills. This is magical. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
thank you. So looking back, those were like the best times of my life, my childhood. Just and my grandmother, she put us to work. She, made us harvest all the perilla leaves and the squash, zucchinis, and the Korean melons, and we would sell these herbs and vegetables to the local markets. And so it was some of the most precious times of my childhood. And so, yeah, basically that was like the journey kind of to Korean herbalism. And about 3 years ago, I was in Korea walking through an herbal market, and it just dawned on me, like, why isn't this as accessible in America? Um, in America, we're going through a healthcare crisis, a food crisis. Our obesity rate is just really extremely high. And also education on like just lifestyle, healthy lifestyle. I feel like Australia is very forward with that. Even Korea, we talk about stress all the time and preventative health. We have a 24-hour TV station just educating citizens about how to cook healthy, longevity, what exercises and sleep patterns you should have to remain healthy. But here in America, I just feel like we are so misinformed. And so that's why I felt like my mission was to kind of shift the conversation to kind of introduce people more towards like, okay, there's more than TCM. Asia's such a huge, continent, and different parts of Asia too is so unique. Our cultures are so unique. And so that's why I feel like, our ancestors foraged plants and made natural medicines to prevent and cure disease. But now we live in a world where it's so sedentary, too convenient, and we are consuming so many preservative foods. So this is really ruining our health and longevity. So my intention is to just share ancient Korean medicinal wisdom that was passed on to me through my grandmothers and through my ancestors and heritage, because I really think we're all from a garden.
Wow, what a way to end a beautiful story. I'm just like, this is the most magical experience and story. For the listeners who know me, I'm right into like growing my own food and making things from scratch. And, maybe you don't know yourself, but, I studied ancestral health, and from a health background, for many years, I love how things all came to be. And I studied Ayurveda, and I'm just like right into this. So this is like my jam. I'm loving it. And such a special story that you just shared. This isn't just something that you were driven to because you had a passion for it. Like, this has been a part of your life for your whole life and a part of your, your full ancestry. So this is really special. And I'm sure everyone who's listening to this can feel just how special this is, because I'm right on it with you when you say that, we all come from a garden. And I always love to say, Grace, that we live on the earth, but we are actually of the earth. And everything of the earth is us. And we do have a huge health crisis around the world, and certain countries are in more of a crisis than others for certain areas and reasons. Australia might not be too far behind America, though. We do have a big health movement here, and I know there's a big health movement in the States, but I think everyone's really responsible for their health status, but they don't realize that it's their responsibility, and the things that we put in and on our body are a direct reflection of our health. So I love that, you know, this is you here bringing beautiful Eastern wisdom to, you know, us, all of us, to help us really encompass healthier lives and healthier bodies and everything. So I'd love to start by asking you, Eastern and Western culture, you have had the best experience in this your whole life, growing up in America, you know, coming from Eastern background. How does the Eastern and Western health kind of merge and get things right together? And how do they are they just completely different? Because there's a lot of people who don't know the differences between them and they just think health is just health, right? But Eastern health, Western health are very, very different. So before I ask you about the herbalism between the two, let's talk about just the general health between the two. What's the foundation of Eastern and then the foundation of Western, and how do they mend together and how don't they mend together?
Yeah, for sure.
I
So,
think that was like
I
four
mean,
questions in one. I apologize.
well, I'll try to answer all the questions that you asked, and hopefully I don't like confuse anyone. But to put it simply, you know, Eastern medicine or traditional Eastern medicine is based on our spiritual philosophies as well. So I'm sure most people know Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism. Um, and Eastern medicine is kind of founded on Taoism. Um, and that's kind of like the foundation of traditional Chinese medicine. TCM is practiced in different ways in different countries of Asia. So there's, you know, kind of the Japanese Eastern medicine way. And then Koreans, we kind of mix in not only Taoist philosophy, but also Buddhism and Confucianism. And we emphasize a lot on Confucian philosophy. And the concept of qi or qi. So similar to herb and herb, it's pronounced differently throughout Asia. So in Korea, we pronounce it as qi. And qi is an ancient healing method about really bringing the body into balance. And balance stems from both our internal processes of the body, but also external factors. So it can be anything from your lifestyle habits to our environment. So when we ever have any kind of chronic health issues, disease, it's a result of the imbalance of qi. And in order to avoid that imbalance, you know, Eastern medicine really focuses on preventative health as a first line of defense. So Korea in particular, we talk about stress all the time and it's taken very seriously. And so whenever we have any kind of indigestion or any kind of pain or muscle pains or aches, we really try to implement healing herbs and acupuncture. First acupuncture and then the herbs. So herbs are kind of like the last step that you take, or any kind of like medication, because we really want to emphasize and make sure that we're eating the right foods, because food and medicine are complementary in Eastern kind of medicine.
So beautiful.
So yeah, and traditional Korean medicine really considers our human body as our own like miniature universe. And we really emphasize on the hands and the ears. Our hands are kind of like the constitution of our entire body. So for example, the top of your middle finger, if you have headaches, you kind of put pressure on the top of your middle finger. Stomach aches is usually like the middle of your palm. And so am I on the right track with like all the questions?
I don't know, but I'm loving it. I'm just fascinated. Like so many elements of health fascinate me. And, I always think of when I studied ancestral health, and they always said that the heel of your foot, your heel, heals you, and the sole of your foot connects you with your soul. And I just love when you just said, how Korean medicine focuses on your hand and your ears. And everything you can see on the outside is a direct reflection on the inside. So that makes perfect sense. And I'm just loving everything you're sharing. So continue.
Yeah. And I'd love to kind of read this text from 동의보감, which is
beautiful.
kind of so Heo-jun was kind of the godfather of traditional Korean medicine. And he wrote this text for kind of his way of teaching. He was one of the royal physicians during the Joseon dynasty. And so this is a translated version, but he says that mankind is the most precious of all living things in the universe. The round head resembles heaven. The flat foot resembles earth. Man has 4 limbs, as the universe has 4 seasons. Man has 5 viscera, as the universe has 5 phases. Man has 6 bowels, as the universe has 6 extremes. Man has 8 joints, as the universe has 8 winds. Man has 9 orifices, as the universe has 9 stars. And man has 12 meridians, as the universe has 12 hours. So, basically he's saying that, our entire body is basically, part of the universe. And that's what essentially key is too. We're all interconnected and kind of this kind of web, right? So
that is
going
so beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, it's not what I wrote.
No, but thank you for sharing it. Like, you brought it to life here for us to discuss and everyone listening. So yeah, you brought it to life. So thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. Yeah. So going back to the 3 spiritual philosophies, Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism, Buddhism really focuses on how we can be better with our lives in order to achieve enlightenment, right? And achieve that state of nirvana. And it's truly about how to live with yourself. Taoism is based on the question of how we can become aligned with nature and the cosmos. So how we can live with nature. And Confucianism is based on how we can improve ourselves academically to bring peace and order to the world. And it's truly about how to live in the world. So it really teaches, Confucian philosophy really teaches us how the mind and the body are really interconnected. And that has played an important role in Korean heritage.
Wow. I'm just like fascinated. I'm just so fascinated. It's just, there's so much that we can learn in the Western world from Eastern practices and the Eastern way of living and the Eastern way of caring for our bodies, that I think that and I'm sure you would feel this way too about living in the West, is that the more we can adapt and bring in these practices into our daily life, the more we can rebalance our body. And a lot of Western practice that, sometimes is great, but also heals like more of the traumatic stuff. And there's more of like a trauma approach or an instant approach and an instant fix, as opposed to like a total rebalance, is that a lot of us who have a health imbalance, whatever that may be, have focused so much on the Western approach that we've even forgotten there's other approaches out there.
Totally. And, everybody has their own kind of balance, right? And it's very individualistic. So really listening to your body, and also kind of like your inner spirit and mind is just so important. And whenever you have these kind of like muscle tensions or headaches, or your body gives you these signs, right? And so always checking in is just so important. And so, we kind of talk about the yin and yang energetics. Do you know anything about the yin and yang
Yes, I
energetic?
do. I personally, I do. But for those who are listening who might not know anything about the yin and yang, maybe a little explanation would be fantastic.
Yeah. I actually wrote a poem about yin and yang.
Oh, please. I'm loving all of these shares. Please share.
Well, actually, I recently got a book deal, and so I'm just writing all of
Congratulations.
my knowledge. Thank you, thank you. And so, um, this poem is called Yin Yang Ancestral Twine. Yin, a mysterious darkness of feminine energy, like the moon's soft reflection on a river. Yang, illuminating light of masculine energy, like the sun's clarity in exposing the mountains. Today, a brand new moon. Tomorrow, a brand new sun. The lightness of a dandelion is yin. The heaviness of a stone is yang. Take my hand and feel the earthly soil of yin. Lift my arms and reach the heavenly clouds of yang. Inside and down when traditions and ancestry fades, outside and up as culture and tribes revive, ancestral twine. Accepting and surrendering what is to come, yin. Willing to take a chance to fulfill our heart's desire, yang. Peace is yin, hope is yang. So even
So beautiful. I'm like mesmerized in this podcast episode. Thank you for sharing, Grace. That's really beautiful.
and I feel like it's a good description of what yin and yang is. They are polar opposites yet complementary, and it's this kind of um, constant balance that we have, that yin and yang internal balance that helps kind of align our key.
It's like the perfect harmonious dance. You know, you can't have two
Yes,
leaders. You need to have like an allower and a leader. That's so
totally.
beautiful. So let's dive into the herbalism. Like a lot of people have heard of traditional Chinese medicine, as you mentioned earlier. But what is really special about Korean herbalism as opposed to Western herbalism? Like, what are the differences?
Yeah. Okay. So I would say our geographical landscape is the biggest difference, right? We are a small peninsula. And if you look on the map, Korea is right in between Japan and Korea and China. And because of our geography, we're surrounded by the sea, but I believe it's 60 or 65% of our geography is mountain. So with Korean herbalism, it has a very, very long ancestry, whereas Western herbalism, and I'm not sure about Australia in particular, but in the US, America, the herbalism America's such a young country. And so when it was colonized, most of the Native Americans, they were the ones to practice and introduce herbalism, but unfortunately, a lot of them kind of became extinct. So that those types of herbal traditions weren't passed on for that long. But in the East, it was, Korea's cultural influence from China and Japan um, kind of created Koreans' emergence of herbalism. And it's through, honestly, it was through famine, Korea, we have gone through many, many wars. China has colonized us at one point, Japan has too. And so, in order to survive, herbalism played such a huge part in that. Just going into the mountains, foraging. And so that I would say is the biggest difference is the history and geography, the geographical landscape.
So it's so fascinating. I love that you mentioned about like the colonization in America. Australia is also a very young country. And, if you think we're only a couple hundred years old, and I just spent 3 months traveling around the top end of Australia, seeing a lot of Indigenous culture. And we're very fortunate we still have a lot of Indigenous culture still in Australia, but it's lacking a lot because of the shunning of the Indigenous culture that has been so present in our country anyway. And the Indigenous culture here is that there are so many, we call them bush foods and, bush herbs. And it's just something I would love to learn about. There is so much that's out there, and we just walk straight past it on our hike, or, that we don't even know that that's what it is. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to learn more about it. So tell us. Sorry, you go.
I usually say when there's a weed, there's a way to make like nutritious medicine or herbal teas. For example, dandelion. I mean, there's so much here, and people don't know how you can just make nutritious dandelion tea. That's so great for your hormones and your estrogen levels.
Yeah. There's so much opportunity for everybody, isn't there? Like so much opportunity.
Totally.
So tell us a little bit about how can Korean herbalism support the menstrual cycle? So are there any specific herbs that you would recommend? What's the Korean herbalism approach to a balanced cycle?
Yeah, so we have this philosophy called Yakshi Tongwan, which is kind of like food is medicine and the 5 elements. Do you know the 5 elements of foods? That is, based on TCM kind of practice as well, but Koreans practice that as well with our cuisine and the herbs. And, have you tried Korean food before?
I actually haven't tried a lot of Korean food before. I
Okay.
personally,
Wow.
I don't eat a lot of meat myself, and I've been gluten-free, dairy-free for a long time. And I find in Australia anyway, the certain restaurants that offer Asian food can be very challenging for me to eat at. So that's one of the reasons why I haven't really tried Korean food before.
You will love try to find a Korean vegetarian restaurant. You will love this traditional dish that's so colorful and so herbaceous. It's called bibimbap, and it's a variety of just kind of like herbs over a bed of rice, and then you get like hot red pepper paste to kind of like spice it, and you just kind of like combine all of the dish, the herbs, and it's just so delicious.
Oh, sounds delicious.
Yeah. So for women, so what's interesting in Korean culture is that let's talk about postpartum because I feel like so Korea has universal health care. They have affordable healthcare as well, where acupuncture is literally like $20. And I don't know how much that is in Australian currency.
It's about the same. About the same.
Okay,
Maybe 25, 30.
Okay, got it. But yeah, so once a woman gives birth, they usually go to a postpartum care center. And usually you stay in these postpartum care centers with a nurse. They have a whole staff, like a doula, and you are there with this team to help nourish the new mother, because the whole philosophy is that when a new mother is fully recovered, nourished, and healthy, she'll raise a healthy child. And so one of the essential dishes that they nourish the mother with is seaweed soup. So seaweed has the same amount of, what is it? The mineral content of breast milk. So it helps with
Wow.
nourishing the mom when she's breastfeeding too. So you're constantly, like literally at least for 30 days, you're just consuming seaweed soup
I
with
love
like
seaweed.
rice and like,
Yeah.
yeah. So so with that helps with producing good mineral based breast milk. So that is something that we really consume regularly for postpartum. Mugwort is a really great nutritious herb too. And you can steam that. You can also make a bath soak with mugwort. Um, it's really just good for detoxifying. It helps with blood circulation. Um, another, you know, fermented foods. We have a lot of fermented dishes, such as kimchi. Have
Hmm.
you tried kimchi before?
Yes, actually, I make my own.
Oh, wow. With what's your base?
So generally, I use a daikon,
Okay, daikon. Yeah, I
which
love
is like
daikon.
for people listening, it's kind of like it looks like a
Radish.
white. Yeah, it's like a radish, but it looks bigger like a white carrot.
Yes, yes.
It's
And
bigger
it's
like
like
that.
thick.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
very
It's
thick.
very round. It's kind of like a white cucumber, but bit bigger. And so I use that. I'm like, is this a good description? I use that cabbage, carrot, and then I'll pop in like chilies from my garden. Sometimes I pop in the stems of the cilantro, or we call it coriander here. So I'll
Uh-huh.
chop up the
Yeah.
stems so I don't waste the stems, and I'll pop that in. But that's kind of like my base.
That's amazing. And I was actually going to mention daikon. So you already mentioned daikon is just so nutritious also, and it helps with hormonal balance.
Really? I
Making
didn't know
daikon
that.
soup. Yes, yes. Making daikon soup. A lot of postpartum women, it's seaweed soup and daikon radish soup that really helps with just nourishing the mom, but also
Mm.
balances your hormones.
Oh,
Um,
fantastic.
and seaweed soup is also taken on birthdays. It's a tradition that just to kind of like, it's very cleansing too. And lots of just iron minerals in seaweed. So take a lot of seaweed.
Oh, that sounds
We
really
all
good.
need more seaweed in our lives.
We definitely can use a lot more iodine and seaweed, that's for sure. Oh, I'm really into like the whole seaweed thing at the moment. On the weekend, I just had a sushi class with my partner. We had a sushi chef come to our house. He's a Japanese chef,
Oh,
and he taught us all
cool.
about sushi and all this stuff. And anyway, so we have lots of seaweed in the home right now because we're getting into that whole seaweed
Oh
thing.
my gosh, that's
Um,
awesome.
I didn't know that about daikon, so I'm so glad that I already buy daikon. In Australia, you can't buy them in the grocery store. So if you're thinking like the mainstream grocery store, so if you're listening to this and
Yeah,
like, I want to try some daikon, I'm not sure about other countries, but here you can't buy it from the store. I can only buy it from the Chinese, it's at the farmer's market, but the Chinese stalls have it.
yeah,
None of the Aussie farmers in their stalls, or like if they grow their own food and have their own stall, they don't have daikon, but the Chinese always have it. And it's pretty much year round. I know that it's obviously it goes out of season. It's not about, it
mhm,
doesn't grow all year round, but most places do have it most of the year, which is good.
totally.
Oh, this is great
Um,
knowledge.
Another thing that's really great for anyone who has thyroid issues,
Mm-hmm.
uh, cabbage and carrots, steamed cabbage, carrots, and just literally making that into a soup or a porridge smoothie. That really helps kind of with anyone with thyroid issues.
That's great
Um,
to know.
yeah, so I had a client who had a thyroid problem, and you know, just coming from my heritage, and my mother is like an amazing, amazing cook. I was just telling her about the client. She was just like, what about just cabbage? And sometimes you just have to eat very
Mm.
simply, you know? And so she did this. She literally just had steamed carrots and cabbage and some like fermented pepper paste that Koreans have with their veggies. And her thyroid went away after 30 days of just eating carrots and cabbage.
Wow.
So
Power is in simplicity. There's so much power in simplicity.
totally.
I also love, Grace, how so much of Asian food, and like, if you know, Indian food is also from the East, and I loving Ayurveda. I'm very fond of Indian dishes, but I love how both of these Eastern cultures are all about warm foods. You know, it's not in Eastern culture to be like, oh, having my morning smoothie, you know, that's not in the culture. And I love that, how supportive the food is in the method of its cooking, not just the ingredients that are in the dish. And I think that's a really important point to point out to people, is that it's not always just making sure you have lots of daikon, for example, chewing on it raw. Don't actually know how that would taste very well, but
Yeah.
it's the cooking method that goes with it. And that a lot of herbs, from especially Ayurvedic herbs, are very much amplified in the cooking method. Is
For
that
sure.
similar in Korean herbalism?
Cooking, we do a lot of steaming, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of fermenting. We ferment, I I would say over 50% of our foods. um, but also again, the whole yin and yang philosophy, like you don't have to eat all like cooked foods either, but don't consume all raw either. But having
Mm,
that kind of good balance of kind of warming, nourishing foods is the best way, because you don't want it too hot either.
totally.
Um, and in Korea, we don't even have any salad bars.
I love that. I'll never forget when I went to India for the first time for a 2-week Panchakarma cleanse. I'm actually running one in 2023. So if you're listening and you're interested in that and joining me in
Oh,
India,
wow.
it's a 14-day cleanse through a beautiful retreat space.
Oh my gosh, can I join you?
Yes, you
When?
can.
When is
So
this?
we're planning around May 2023, taking a group of like
Okay.
8 women to southern India. It's Kerala, India. Little plug for the for the retreat. This is a non-profit retreat for me. I just gather the group together, and I kind of host, you could say. I also go through the cleansing modality, and it was my first experience, you know, especially if you think of the Western culture of health. It's very much like smoothies, fruit bowls, smoothie bowls, having raw juices, you know, hardcore cleansing. In
Yeah.
When I went to India, we had all this beautiful food, and I did do a 3-day ghee cleanse, which is another story altogether. But
Oh, wow.
with this experience, I didn't eat one thing cold. I had fresh fruit, but it was always fresh. It was room temperature. And I'm someone who
Yeah.
always likes to, you know, I pull my stuff out of the fridge, let it like come to room temperature, and then I'll make a smoothie. I won't have something straight out of the
Great.
freezer unless it's like a 38-degree day where I live. It's very tropical and humid. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm dying of heat. Sometimes I do that, but it's quite rare. The warmth of the food, I just, you know, it took me like 10 days to realize, oh my God, I haven't had anything cold. I came home and I was like, why do we even need fridges? You know, like we can just cook like we don't need a fridge.
Yeah.
I still have a fridge, but having the warmth is so supportive of digestion. And I know really big pull and difference, what I've noticed in my health experience being in the health industry, is that Indian Ayurvedic medicine is very much led for good digestive gut health, whereas
Mhm.
Chinese medicine is really led with good liver health and supporting your liver
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
digestion too, but they really push the liver first, is what I've found
Yes.
anyway. And I love that they're two different Eastern cultures, but they're both Eastern. They're both very complementary, because your
Very,
liver works with
very
your gut and your gut works with your liver. So what would you say it is for Korean medicine, or like Korean health focus, out of the two organs? Or is there another one that Korea is like, this is the one that we focus on first?
Yeah, I mean, we tend to follow more of the TCM
Mm-hmm.
method, but then again, we have our own kind of styles. So one is kind of similar to Ayurveda, where you fall into kind of like your constitution, right? In Korean traditional medicine, we have it's called the Sasang typology. So you fall into one of the four typologies, and it's Soyang Soum, and then Taeyang and Taeums, and it's all based on your physical attributes, your personality, and your environment. So
Mm.
those three factors are taken into account, and then whichever constitution you are, then you kind of avoid certain foods and consume certain foods.
Very similar to like the dosha system in
Yes.
Ayurveda. Yeah, very
Hmm.
similar, being either
Very
pitta, kapha,
similar.
or vata. But
Yeah.
I think it's also good to remember that we're a bit of everything, and
Yeah.
to not just go, the West is very much like, I am a vata and I will just eat vata foods. But,
Yeah.
we're ever evolving and changing. So like take everything with a
Yeah,
bit of grain of
every
salt.
season you can be one of the four, right,
Mm.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Oh, this
Um,
is so good.
so, and then we also follow the kind of the five elements too, whereas sour food is good for your liver and your gallbladder, bitter food is good for your heart, small intestine, sweet food is great for your stomach and pancreas, spicy is good for your lungs and your large intestines, and then salty foods are really good for your kidneys and your bladder.
Mm.
So if you, I just would love to take you to a Korean restaurant because you will see this whole spread. There's all of these mini side dishes, all just herb based, and it's the kind of cuisine is very colorful. You'll see everything from yellow to green to brown. So it's you have all the colors there.
Well, I am adding this to my list of things to do,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
places to go. I'm definitely going to actually look for a Korean restaurant in my local area after this. So thank you for the inspo. I'm so excited. I love all of this. So before we wrap up, because we are almost out of time, I
Mhm.
would love to hear from you, Grace. For the women who are listening to this and like, oh my God, I've got so much good information and good knowledge, and their core focus is to just have a healthy cycle, have a healthy cycle for healthy fertility. I really believe having a fertile cycle is a healthy cycle.
Yes.
So what are your top 3 to 5 Korean herbalism tips? Things that they can do or they can use or take or eat,
Yes.
or
Mhm.
drink or whatever it might be that can support us on a daily basis for a healthy cycle.
For sure. One that comes immediately to mind is burdock root. Burdock is a blood cleanser. It's really just really helps with like your blood flow, your circulation. It's very a neutral type of herb. And so you can just put 3 to 4 little pieces of dried burdock root into a cup of water and make just a nutritious tea out of it. You Korean, there's dishes, recipes, and I'm happy to share a recipe with your audience, that you can send to them, of a burdock root dish that's so easy
Ooh,
to make and so
please.
delicious. Yeah, and you can put that on top of your salad or just eat it with rice and seaweed wraps or whatever, but it's one of my go-to staples that I make. So yeah, burdock root, mugwort, as I mentioned, is another really great herb that I mean, people here in the US consider it as a weed. And whenever I spot it, like while I'm just kind of like hiking or on the sidewalk, I'm just like, oh my gosh, in a gold mine right now. But mugwort is really just great as you can make a compress out of it. So if you're having like stomach, pains, cramps, you can decoct the mugwort in hot water, let it steam, and just put like a towel, face towel, or a hand towel, let it soak in the mugwort, and kind of just put it over your tummy, and it's very, very calming. I love taking mugwort baths too, so you can like soak mugwort into your bath, and it's just super soothing, healing. Another, I would say, dandelion root is really great. It's not per se Korean, but I just love drinking dandelion tea, or even barley tea is really nutritious. And again, anything seaweed, soup related. And thinking, oh, hibiscus. So Korea's national flower is the rose of Sharon, hibiscus. And we consume a
I
lot
didn't know
of,
that.
yeah,
I was like,
not many people know.
I was like, a hibiscus? Really? I was,
Yeah,
yeah, okay,
that's
that's
our native
beautiful.
flower.
Well, that's
Yeah,
beautiful
it's
because
our,
we have so many hibiscuses here where I live. I
oh
would
my
not,
gosh, it'll always remind you of Korea because
yes,
that's our
okay,
national
that's
flower.
fantastic.
Yeah, so just drinking a hibiscus tea with cinnamon is so delicious. And cinnamon has really high antioxidants, and so it's really great and nutritious. Yeah, so I would recommend those.
Oh, they're fantastic. Well, I'm going to keep all of this and pop it in the show notes so that everyone can read, like write them all down. And if you're listening to this and haven't been taking notes, you might need to come back and take more notes on all the other beautiful things Grace has shared. But Grace, you've been
Ooh, another
such...
one
Oh,
too.
yes.
You can make mugwort salve if you have the time to make a salve with it and just rub it around your stomach.
Oh,
Um,
okay. I like
if you
that.
have
Mugwort
like any
salve.
cramps.
And people are like,
Yeah,
what's a salve? It's kind of like a not a cream, but like a body butter, but with made from a tea. So it's a bit
oil
more,
based.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah. And then with the hibiscus too, I love making a flower essence from it.
Oh.
So yeah, flower essences are super. I've been really obsessed with flower essences lately.
It's
Um,
a good obsession. A good obsession.
yeah. So yeah, I've been playing around with mixing like my own flower essences, but hibiscus flower essence is very, very calming.
Thank you so much for sharing. Now share with us, how can people like find you? What's the best platform for them to connect with you? What's your website? Let us know, and then I'll wrap us up
Yeah.
with a final question.
Yeah, so my website is keyalchemy.com, alchemy.com. You can follow me on Instagram, TikTok, email me at care@keyalchemy.com if you want any kind of herbal consultation. A lot of my customers, they love my consultations as well. Um, and that's it. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, I'll make sure I put all of those links in our show notes so people can easily connect with you. Now tell us, I have a final podcast question for you, Grace. So we're changing gears a little bit, and I want you to think back to your younger menstruating self. So when you got your first period, what are 3 things that the younger version of Grace would love to know that you now know today?
Oh man, that is a great question. I would say celebrating. I was so embarrassed and shy, and I just didn't know what to do when I saw the bloody spots on and I was at my friend's house, and I was like, oh my gosh, I felt like shy and really embarrassed. But just having the conversations with like your parents early on, and like I wish that my mother would have told me earlier on during my childhood, like this may happen and we should have a party and celebrate because it's an introduction to your womanhood. And so yeah, I think that that would be something that I wished I did, celebrated it more for that female power.
So beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. Was there anything else you wanted to add to that?
And I feel like red, the color of red is, symbolizes love, right? And lust and all the sensual things. So just remembering that color and just how we as women, we have a lot of influence and power of how we connect with the opposite sex or, the same sex. And that color red is just so just loving and powerful and amazing.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. So beautiful. It's very potent. It's a very potent color.
Very potent. Yeah.
Yeah, very potent, and means lots of different things in different cultures, and it's always still potent.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful, Grace. Thank you so much for being here, sharing all of your beautiful Korean herbalism wisdom. Very much appreciate you've had some beautiful stories, and your poem was great too. So thank you for being here and taking the time to share all of your wisdom with us.
Thanks so much, Jema.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for tuning into every episode of the Well Woman podcast. For everything we mentioned in today's episode, you can find this in the show notes over at wellsome.com/podcast. If this episode excited you, please hit follow on Spotify, which means all of my episodes will pop up in your feed weekly so you never miss a weekly drop. I'd love you to leave a review on Apple Podcasts too. Love this episode? Come and follow me over on Instagram at wellsome_Jema. Say hi and share what you've taken away from this episode with me. Now, is there a bestie, sister, or a friend who you know who might be fed up, frustrated, and confused with their cycles? Are they ready to join you in awakening their cyclical essence too? Well, take a screenshot of this podcast episode, share it on your socials, email it, text it, or any way you need to get it to them. So together we can all live in flow, harmony, and balance with our cycles. Now, until next time, beautiful, get connected, listen to your body, and remember, body confidence all begins with living in tune with your menstrual cycle.